All right. Welcome, Mark. How have you been?
Well, Millbilly.
Uh,
Beautiful summer's day here in Wisconsin.
yeah, it's
Uh,
beautiful weather. Beautiful
yeah,
weekend.
yeah. So I've been in the area for nearly a week now, and doing my usual thing of visiting Stephen and some other people, and yeah, everything's going very well.
How's Steven doing?
He's good. He's the usual chirpy self that he is. He's obviously, like most of us, anxious to have a ruling from Judge Sukovich from Sheboygan.
Mm-hmm.
Um, really hard to, other than ill will, it's hard to explain why these things take so long, because this is not a trial. This is a request for a hearing. Um, and the presumption that the evidence presented is valid unless it's recklessly put together lies to the favor of Stephen. So she
Mm-hmm.
should just say, oh, okay, this looks on the face of things a reasonable petition. Why I should call a hearing and then test how good this evidence is by the normal process of calling witnesses and having testimony under oath and on the record.
Mm-hmm.
But for reasons we only can explain through history, anything that's got Stephen's name attached to it tends to be pushed back on, and that's unfortunate. But so hence the need to be patient. But there's only so much of that you can be. I did actually had told to me the other day, which I wasn't aware of, that from the date of the last submission, which was
In
Kathleen
January.
Zellner's, her response to the state's response, that under Wisconsin law, the judge has 90 days to rule. Now, I don't know that from first-hand discovery, so if I'm wrong, I could be wrong, but someone
Mm-hmm.
told me that. So if that were true, though, she's way over that already. So should have been ruled on by the end of April on that basis. But we haven't heard anything from her. So
Yeah, it makes no sense because, like, when the state when they're asking for more time, she responds right away. But when she comes to her making a ruling,
yeah,
crickets, crickets.
yes. Well, I mean, I think it's reasonable to presume. I mean, I say that reservedly because I don't know what reasonableness is in this case, but it's reasonable to presume, I think, that the reason why she hasn't responded in a reasonable time is because they're struggling to come up with a valid legal reason why he shouldn't be granted a hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I mean, and there's a reason for that. That's because the hearing has merit, or the call for a hearing has merit.
Yep.
So just let it run. And if she rules against it in the hearing, so be it. But he deserves a hearing. And this pushing back all the time is only going to work against not only the judge's reputation but the legal reputation. So it ultimately is a denial of his natural justice rights or his constitutional rights to a fair delivery of justice.
Mm-hmm.
But just call the hearing, call the witnesses. Move it along. If it's all rubbish, kick it out. Not that I think that, by the way, but
Well,
to deny him a hearing is to leave him on the starting line without a right to drive the car around the track. So, and he has a right to do that. So,
Stephen's cases keeps getting stronger and stronger the longer they delay justice.
yeah, exactly. I
Yeah.
definitely get the feeling. I'm sure you're going to ask me at some point here about the latest ruling from Zellner, but I just get the feeling that the wagons are circling, and there's more and more people feeling, oh, hey, we need to deal with this, and so these new witnesses, or some new, and some not as new but relatively new, are just examples of that. So we'll see, but just deal with it.
Yep.
And I've always say it's a bit tedious and perhaps a little bit boring for some, but I always say you don't have to like Stephen Avery to want him to get justice, right? Because
Correct.
we all need to be entitled to justice if we get ourselves in that similar
Well,
position,
if the
right?
state thinks he's guilty as they charge, what do they have to worry about if their case is so strong?
Yes, and the essence of, without minimizing it too much, the essence of where we're at so far is this, and that is, if the evidence was before Stephen's trial court, that is the new evidence that has yet to be, if you like, debated.
Mm-hmm.
If that was before the trial court, would it, that is the evidence of the sightings and the evidence of the Brady violation on the Sawinski phone call, if that was before the trial court, would have the jury had a reason for a different decision? And that's really what we're saying here. And the judge should be saying, well, this is relevant evidence. It brings in a third-party suspect. It shows also that there's on the surface of things, there's a Brady violation in terms of the hiding of exculpatory phone calls.
Well, it's a fact that they did suppress lots of things.
Yes.
And we even have, what audio we do have, dispatchers stating that, oh, we're not handling this case. And then we have callers calling in, calling Manitowoc, leaving their tip, and then calling Calumet because they don't trust Manitowoc.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we got Sanglob. He doesn't. Colborn didn't file a report about talking to Stephen until 8 months later. So what are they really trying to hide? They're not doing their job from the get-go.
Yeah, no, see, and this is the thing I find a little, not for me, nor for you, or for those who are really quite close to the case, is this is not a question of incompetence. This is a question of willful intent to deceive, right? They are two totally different things. So it's not a question of, oh, they weren't very good at their job and they made mistakes, etc. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a willful intent to deceive, which resulted in prosecution of two innocent men and the real perpetrator being left unattended, whoever that shall be, right? This goes really deep to the heart of what justice is supposed to be about, and the fact that we should be able to rely upon law enforcement officials to do the right thing. And so the resistance...
Look at the 1985 case. He had 18 plus alibi witnesses, and they still convicted him.
Yes.
I mean, his whole trial was from the day one. Nothing was done like it should have been.
No.
And every judge that's been in charge of his case have history with him till this day. I mean, Sikowitz, it was on the civil suit that the Hallbox took out before she even got and then all the appellate judges, they have history going back to 1985 and him being released in 2003. It's
Correct.
sad. And the fact that they don't have a prosecutor now, the state is being on behalf of the prosecution side.
Correct.
And also,
I mean, there's just so many things. I mean, I won't bore you with the detail because I know you all know it, but just a fundamental thing like Judge Fox's willingness to allow Brendan's so-called confession to be entered in as evidence when he had no lawyer present or no other advocate to support him in those interviews. I mean,
none of them. Not a single interview did he have a lawyer or a guardian present.
Yes, and in any civilized nation around the world, that would never be permitted. That so-called confession would be thrown out as inadmissible evidence for that reason.
I mean, is it the reason why they're fighting this so bad? Is because they got rid of more than just the bones?
Yeah. Well, what they're fighting it so bad is that the consequences for the discovery of the truth are far more than just financial. That's why they're fighting it so hard.
Oh yeah. This
So
is going to make a lot of people have to answer a lot of questions.
yes, and it's likely, I would think. Let's just walk down the line a little bit here. Let's say Stephen is given a hearing, right? And let's say that hearing gets to a point where he's less entitled to a new trial. I don't think they'll prosecute him, and the reason why is because, this is just my view, no one else's, is the prosecution is going to bring a criminal prosecution that is, has a criminal consequence, will bring out evidence that will be more painful to the players on the outside than to Stephen. And whilst a civil prosecution or a civil suit claim is financially painful, it has no criminal implication. So I don't think these law enforcement officials, the ones that we know are in the inner circle, are going to want to get up on the witness stand and raise their hand, because they know.
And if they do, they're going to use their classic term, "I don't recall."
Yeah,
which is bullshit.
Yeah, but so that's for another day. But I just go. The focus for me is Stephen, or anyone in Stephen's circumstances are entitled to a hearing, an evidentiary hearing, at the minimum to attest the merits of the newly discovered evidence, and that's where the focus should be, and there shouldn't be any attempt to deny that of him.
Nope. Well, we got 3 witnesses now stating they've seen Bobby with her car. One of them being his brother.
Yes. Well, that piece of evidence has been around a long time now. One from Blaine.
People can't forget it. And that's before she's even reported missing. Correct.
And we have Thomas Sawinski's evidence from a year ago. We now have the new Thomas evidence. The issue simply here is, forget about anything else, that this is substantial evidence that justifies a hearing.
They're all little pieces to the puzzle. Ramlo.
Does that mean Bobby's the person who is responsible for Teresa's death?
No, not necessarily. That's for a court to decide.
Absolutely.
Innocent to proven guilty.
Correct.
Unless your name is Avery.
That's right. But that's absolutely correct, Millbilly. That's for a court to decide. It's not for us to decide. But there is sufficient evidence, independent evidence, to warrant Stephen having a hearing at a minimum. And so that's where this matter needs to proceed. And these people who are coming forward with this evidence have a legitimate reason to be present in the circumstances. They were relevant people at the time in that week of October 31 to November 5, in those 6 days. They were relevant people to be there. They have valid reasons to be there. And they've got no axe to grind other than to be truthful. In the case of Sawinski, he was of the view, at least at some point, that his evidence was considered by the police or the sheriff's office and had been contemplated and either dismissed or whatever, irrelevant. So he reported the matter at the time. I don't know about the other Tom. I suspect, knowing the nature of Manitowoc, and other things I've heard going on firsthand, with jurors especially, that he may have been one of these people who thought, oh, I know something here, but I'm a bit fearful of speaking out. I don't know I don't know the person firsthand at all, but I suspect if you're in that situation and you know evidence and you see someone go to jail, in this case 2 people, that's got to play on your mind forever, hasn't it? That you could have done something that potentially could have averted that. So the fact that it's taken him, it seems, as best I can tell, so many years to come forward, it's not an issue for me.
We got Roger Rouse calling in 3 different times, stating that the cops are responsible for this and talking about how they set him up too.
Yeah. Well, we've had lots of people claim lots of things in this case, because there's plenty of crazies around, right? They just like the notoriety of having their name out there.
But he called on the 5th of November, and then he called back on this twice on the 7th, once in the morning and once at night.
Yeah.
So, and he not just called Calumet, he called Manitowoc too.
Yeah.
So,
well, they wanted to dismiss the calls that they didn't want to hear, and they only wanted to deal with the ones that they were relevant to them.
No.
And the fact that you personally, as I presume many others have had, or differently, obtaining, not differently, but deliberate distraction of obtaining phone calls relevant to this period.
Oh, even Zellner FOIA'd for the same stuff. Everybody's and their mama is FOIA'd for, and forever. Oh, we don't have it. We got rid of it. Doesn't exist.
Yeah.
New clerk of courts, new sheriff. I mean, the sheriff is still connected to Stephen no matter what, but the new clerk did her job properly and released the calls that they said didn't exist. But where's the audio for the fourth?
Exactly.
But we have dispatch logs of them placing calls from the sheriff's department, but we don't have no audio for it. And I would like to know why they're calling Paul Rabas on the 4th twice, just afternoon.
Yes.
Coincidentally, the last day that Ramlo seen the RAV4 and talked to an officer at the Cenex. Is it connected? I mean, Paul Rabas is the Maryville fire chief too, and he's also the one that assists moving the RAV4 from the property.
Yes.
Coincidence? I think not.
No. There's so many of those little.
I mean, why did you need to call for a wrecker to come when there's one on the property?
Exactly. Yeah.
And the delay of time for them removing the car from the property too. That doesn't make any sense. Why did they wait to the cover at night? And they covered up with a tarp because they knew that news choppers are going to be flying over filming.
Yes.
So they don't want to see. What did they not want us to see?
Yeah, exactly.
Lots of questions and no answers ever, unfortunately.
Yes. Well, when you're dealing in a pack of lies, then all these little loose ends occur. You know, that's the consequence of creating a false narrative about what went on here. So, you know, there's probably 1,000 of those sort of questions that remain unanswered for the very reason that it's a false prosecution. And 2 men have been in prison, Stephen for the second time, but Stephen and Brendan now this time, both for 18 more years. And they've taken all of Brendan's life and pretty much most of Stephen's, along with the previous prosecution. And it goes to the character of both those men, Brendan and Stephen, how resilient they are in light of all that's happened to them. Right? And the reason why that is, it's easy to tell. It's because they're innocent. They're not in despair. They're obviously annoyed and angry about what's happened to them, but they're not in despair because they're innocent, right? And they know it's just a matter of discovering the truth, which is not an easy task, but nonetheless, we're seeing progress, and that's most encouraging.
Well, what's your thoughts on this convicting that's going to be coming out?
Oh God, it's just a piece of bloody entertainment. That's all it is. I mean, look, it's going to, if it comes out and it's shown, it's not going to add anything to anything. It's just going to actually, as we've seen already, it's just going to show you how little they know what the truth of these matters are. And so it's to be honest, Millbilly, it doesn't even enter my mind. It's not a piece of newly discovered information that's going to be helpful to my understanding of the case.
No, it's going to be more lies pushed by their agenda.
Yeah. You know, anyone can take a news story, a line, and edit and display it or push it in a way that and to create an outcome that suits whatever the objective is. You know, if they want to do a 20-hour documentary on why Stephen and Brendan are guilty, if they want to do a 20-hour documentary, go for it. You know, so
you can't forget that Netflix creators, Laura and Myra, they reached out to the prosecution side of the case, law enforcement too, and they wouldn't sign their release.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's why they were forced to use whatever trial footage they had.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's like it just on the trial, it was a 5-week trial, 6-week trial. Each day probably goes for, I don't know, I'm going to guess probably about 6 or 7 hours. Yeah. You know, there's 26, 5, 30, there's 30 days of trial roughly. there's 100 that would make 180 days of 180 hours of actual trial transcript, somewhere of that number anyway. And the documentary, the trial aspects of the documentary only went for about 2 episodes, I think, from memory, maybe 3. So you have to edit things down otherwise you can't create anything that's capable of being watched. But I mean, were there things in the documentary that could have been done differently? Sure. Could have been maybe done a little bit? Sure. Did the documentary, in essence, get the factual aspects right and allow the viewer to digest the information and come to their own conclusion? Sure, they did. There's no question about that. So I don't at all go with that business that the documentary was somehow biased or predetermined. Plus, there was a lot to the Stephen aspect of the story because of his previous wrongful conviction. In fact, that's why the documentary makers were going over there in the first place. The occurrence of this Teresa Halbach matter was just something that happened, kind of consequential.
They were just highlighting the fact that did his 1985 case have anything to do with what happened in 2005?
Yeah. And it's interesting. I mean, the number of players that were relevant in 1985 case to the 2005 case was dramatic.
I've always said if you look at the sign-in, sign-out logs from November and go back and look who came back in March, that's who's all involved. They brought the same people back in.
Yeah.
I mean, and during and before the interrogation of Brennan on March 1st, all the Calumet County Sheriff's detectives are at the storage facility with all the evidence while they're talking to him. Yeah. Then they send one of their officers to the Avery property prior to him even getting a warrant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I mean, they just had all their buddies, whether it was in the judicial system or the sheriff's office, all on their side.
Right? I mean, shady shit going on. Mark Wiegert's rescheduling everybody's shifts so that same people will stay there. I mean, Brett Bowe's there for 36 hours straight before he even leaves.
Yeah.
How are you going to do a proper investigation with no sleep?
Exactly.
And how the hell do you stay away for 36 hours straight?
Well, you physically
just on coffee.
Yeah.
Ain't going to happen.
But, I mean, without being too tedious about it, I mean, we're all familiar with the famous press conference when Ken Kratz talks about when Mark Raw, who was the district attorney at the time, Manitowoc, introduces Ken Kratz as the special prosecutor. Boy, that word "special" became relevant.
And that was speedy too. He was named special prosecutor the day they found the car.
Yeah.
And then you got the attorney general frantically calling Manitowoc wanting to talk to Mark Rohr. Why?
Yeah. And Ken Kratz, in the way that he does say things, says, not only do we not want an actual conflict of interest, we don't want even the perception of a conflict of interest. Well, a conflict of interest existed at every moment of this case. Every moment, with all those Manitowoc players still being involved, right? Especially people like Link and Colburn and so on,
Herman.
Yeah.
The Hermans, I should say.
Yeah.
I mean, Greg Shetter, in the case report, Greg Shetter is the one that suggests to Jerry Pagel that they take over the case because we got this lawsuit going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Mark Raw, to this day, is a judge down the road at the Manitowoc Court. I think he's the senior justice down there.
Yep.
He's still in the hood, so to speak.
Sure is.
But the key thing is that Stephen get his due justice deserts, and that is at a minimum an evidentiary hearing. And this is not going to get any easier for the state. So, nope. And I think we're going to find more and more people coming forward, because as I said earlier, I think the wagons are circling here. And
it's a shame that his passenger in a tow truck is no longer alive.
Yes. But that just let him have his day in court and give his evidence, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
now, if you take the Avery name off this matter and you understand how the law's supposed to work for newly discovered evidence and the right to
Oh,
make
for sure.
post conviction, you go, why wouldn't I give Stephen Avery? Why wouldn't I give this petitioner? We'll take his name away from him. Why wouldn't I give this petitioner a hearing? I'm supposed to. The law says I'm supposed to, and I'm supposed to accept that the evidence is valid on the face of things, unless it's recklessly prepared, like, I want you to give Stephen Avery a hearing because he's a nice guy. Well, that would be a reckless petition.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a professional, thorough, properly documented petition for post-conviction relief, and the veracity of that information is deemed to be meritorious, so that she should just grant him a hearing. Then she can judge the merits of that by herself afterwards, but the hearing should still occur.
Mm-hmm.
And then Kathleen Zellner can call whoever she wants, relevant to the petition, to the stand and have to give evidence. And also the car, because we're now talking about the car itself I would imagine, I'm not a lawyer, but I imagine, given the car is very much part of the petition, she should automatically have legal rights to access it.
And, who are these unidentified prints on the back of the RAV? There's
Correct.
blood stain on the RAV.
Correct.
Whose blood is in the quarry?
Correct.
But there's just so many questions that could easily be answered.
Yes. And these are the things that justice calls on to have happen. And let's get it on as fast as I suspected. I don't know that information that I told you before is right, the 90-day thing.
Mm-hmm.
Let's assume for a moment it is. Well, then
she went over her time.
Yeah. I don't know whether if they accept this additional petition as part of the original one, the one that Kathleen Zellner filed on Friday. Was it Friday? Yes, on Friday. If they accept that, whether that gives them more time to consider. I don't think so. I think all she has to consider is whether that petition is supplementary or relevant to the original one. She should have already made a determination on the first petition.
Well, it's just like that petition, her biggest petition that she did. Yeah. And she prematurely denied that.
Yeah.
But then we got an 8-page submission, and she takes as long as she possibly could.
I know. I shouldn't laugh. It's serious, but it's so typical of what's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
But it feels like it's fictitious, right?
Yep.
But if you put yourself in Stephen and Brendan's situation, you're dressed in green, sitting in a prison cell, and your most excitement of the day is when you get to go and buy something at the commissary, or you get a visitor.
Mm-hmm.
No one's got any idea what it's like unless you're in there. So, but I can say, as you asked me before, I'll tell you again that Stephen is doing very well. I don't have the contact with Brendan, but from people I know who do say that he's doing pretty well, all things considered. So, which is good to know.
That's good. He's a very strong individual.
Yeah.
And
sorry, go ahead.
Anything that he's been accused of that he's done, he fesses up to it.
Yes.
I mean, the cat incident, the burglary, Sandra Morris, he admitted to doing that too.
Yeah.
He's always maintained his evidence for the 1985 case and Teresa Halbach, and I believe him. I mean, my research on this case, I started looking out to see if he actually could have did this.
Yeah.
And I don't see no way in hell.
No. He's got no motive to do it.
Seriously. No, not at all.
Did he have an opportunity? I suppose yes. You would say he had the opportunity, that she was on his property.
No, his focus was to get Jody out of jail.
Yeah. And
that's why he was going to sell the snowmobile that he brought home the day before Teresa Halbach comes to the property. That's also the day he brings Suzuki home.
Yeah.
And everybody they ask, they try to say it's been there for weeks. It had only been there for 8 days since the time they talked to them. Like Barb, she lies so much. And all these people protecting her, I don't know what's wrong with y'all either. But that's another story. But
Yeah, you have to be driven by what's right here. Where's your moral compass, right? Um, that has to be the sole focus here. And there are 2 innocent men in prison. That's the main issue for me. And we'll continue to do whatever we need to do to get them their day in court, or their next day in court at least. My view, I'm not a lawyer, but my view is that if things go well for Stephen, it'll just follow automatically that they'll go well for Brendan, because the case is the same case effectively. So if Stephen is found innocent, I don't know how you can keep Brendan's conviction upheld.
like I've always said, Stephen's case is going to dictate what happens to Brendan.
Yes, that's right. And the main goal here at the moment is to keep them well and strong and encouraged, and do all we can to get the truth out there.
Yep. And all these people saying that all these people are only coming forward for the reward, they don't realize that you're only going to get the money if there's a conviction.
Yes, and I can assure you, based on good, reliable knowledge, that neither of these 2 people have ever mentioned the reward issue. So I'm involved in billboards, as you know.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, so I'm a bit more in the know about anything to do with the reward, but neither of these 2 people have been raised or issued the matter of the reward. And as you say, quite rightly, the reward is, I think the wording says, information that leads to the conviction of the killer, right? So these petitions are not about that. They're about giving reasonable doubt to Stephen's conviction. That's basically what these 2 sets of information are about.
What are your thoughts on Mike Osmondson?
I think one of the things I say about Mike Osmondson is one he's a relevant person who should have been a witness in the trial back in 2007, because he was the one who was the person that statement was attributed to. So the fact that he wasn't, if that was such a relevant statement for Ken Kratz to bring forward and assign it to Bobby, but it wasn't Bobby and it was really Mike who said that, then why wasn't Mike brought to the stand? I think Mr. Osmondson, again, the presumption of innocence is his, but he's someone who needs closer examination, put it that way. And when he answered Kathleen Zellner's investigator's question about, did you help Bobby push the car down the road? I'm just making that assumption that statement is true. He replies, I don't recall, or I don't remember. I just can't remember exactly what he said, but either I don't recall or I don't remember. Well, you either did or you didn't. You don't forget those sorts of matters. So to me, Mike Osmondson may be totally innocent of this matter, but he is in need of proper examination. And that would be part of the hearing thing, I would suspect.
The first red flag I've seen is in the case report where he says he was on the property when he couldn't have been and talked to Stephen when he couldn't have.
Yeah.
And the law enforcement ignored it for a very good reason.
Yes. Well, all I can say is that he's a person of interest to help in the discovery of the truth.
Well, that brings my other question now. Why are 2 individuals refusing to talk to Kathleen Zellner's investigators?
Well, Mike Osmondson has spoken to him.
I know. I'm talking about Scott and Bobby.
Oh, those 2. I don't know. Well, the question more is, what have they? Why wouldn't they talk to them? In other words, if you're totally innocent of anything, just forget about the murder aspect. If you're involved in anything at all, whether it's cover-up, corruption, assisting at pre or post the event, then if you're not involved in any wrongdoing or any behavior, then you should come forward and talk. Right?
Well, it's Bobby's statements that inserted Scott into the situation. He's the one that said Scott could alibi him, and Scott would know what time it was.
Yeah. So, but there are a whole host of things, Millbilly, that don't sit comfortably with me. But the fact of the matter is, we have before us a petition, and now in addition to that petition, that brings forward newly discovered evidence that undermines the state's narrative that car never left the Avery salvage yard. That's basically what it does. So forget about who was driving it. Forget about why. We've got now 2 independent witnesses or 3, including Dwayne, who have identified that car was off the property between Monday, the 31st of October, and Saturday, the 5th of November. The whole state case was based on the narrative that car never left the property. That's all that matters to me. I don't care whether it was Santa Claus driving the car.
Yeah,
right? That car was off the property, right?
Oh, and why they edit the flyover? Because the car was not there.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, they spent 25 minutes over the Avery property.
Yes.
I mean, I've tracked the flight log and everything. They
edited that flyover video.
Could debate this case, any aspect, all day, every day. Judges needs to do what's right and grant the evidentiary hearing.
That's all she needs to do, and that's what justice calls on her to do. Forget about any personal view about Stephen Avery as an individual. Justice requires that he have an evidentiary hearing, and when she thwarts it or delays it, she is absolving or absconding in one way from her duty as a justice of the courts in Wisconsin. Yeah.
Yes. Well, hopefully, who knows when we'll hear back from Judge Suck.
I'm sure we're going to hear soon. I'm pretty sure we are going to hear soon. But I've been saying that for a while.
Me too.
Don't rely on my judgments. But
I check his docket every day for updates, and nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And constantly going over things, running scenarios through my head. Oh.
Yeah, just play the role. Just think about this. If you play the role of a judge and you're trying based on analyzing the evidence, that is the evidence in the petition, can't bring anything else in, right?
No, you got to look at what's in front of you, what you're reading.
And you're not supposed to judge the merits of the evidence, by the way, just its integrity in terms of how it's constructed. What are you going to say that would mean that Stephen Avery is not entitled to an evidentiary hearing? I always try to play the devil's advocate in these things, and for God's sake, I can't find a single reason why you could validly argue that he's not entitled to an evidentiary hearing. It's not a trial. This is an evidentiary hearing to examine evidence. The evidence is the petition and the responses to the petition. That's all. Yep. That's all she has to consider. But unfortunately, Judge Sukovich has had a history of trying to be judge and jury at the same time. That's not her role. And she's overstepping her role by trying to do that.
Oh, the Attorney General too.
Yeah.
The response to Zellner's, it's just frustrating for me. I can imagine how Stephen feels.
Yeah, I know exactly. We get frustrated talking about. Imagine him, and he doesn't really have an effective way. It might be a good thing, by the way. He doesn't really have an effective way to analyze things like we do. He doesn't have access to documentation like we do, or being able to chat to it in a broad sort of community way.
I got one question you might be able to answer. Do you have any idea what happened to all the stuff that Dolores had for Stephen's case?
You mean the earlier case, the one from? Yeah. Oh, do I know where physically it is?
Is it gone for good?
I have no idea.
I'm assuming.
I don't know. I've never heard a discussion about that either through anyone, let alone from Stephen. So I presume it's still. Oh, actually, no. I tell you what, I do know something. There's I can't speak about Dolores' stuff, I know some of Stephen's older stuff is with Sandy, but that might be just Stephen's stuff from, that he accumulates and has to get rid of from prison.
Yeah.
But the stuff that Dolores had, I don't know. I haven't heard anything about that. I haven't heard anyone comment about that, nor have I heard Stephen.
How's Alan doing?
Alan's great. I actually saw Alan. Took Alan along with Sandy to see Stephen on Thursday, and then on which he's great. Alan's great. He's very hard of hearing, so that's quite a challenge. So we have to, in many ways, we have to write our questions to him down, so he understands what we were asking him. But Stephen lights up when he sees his dad.
I'm sure.
And vice versa. And then I spent some time with Alan on Friday up in the north, the Crivets area and other places as well. So he's good. For an elderly gentleman, I think he's 86 now, I think. He's still very active. He's busy, pottering around that famous garden of his, growing whatever the vegetable of the day is. And he's a good example of keeping yourself active. And and he's fun to be around, albeit that it'd be a lot easier if his hearing was better. So,
yeah, I'm sure.
But he's good. He looks good, by the way. He looks quite healthy. So that's the good sign. Yeah.
All right. Well, hopefully we hear something positive.
Yeah, I feel confident we will. The billboard in Manitowoc still glowing up there nice and bright at night with the reward showing. It must annoy the hell out of some people, I imagine. But
I appreciate taking your time to do this and have this discussion.
My pleasure. We're all involved in this because we could all see how you could easily get caught up in something like this, and what we're trying to do is to bring justice to Stephen and Brendan, and hopefully in doing so, bring awareness to people how the justice system can be manipulated to work against you. So, so it's a worthy cause, Millbilly, and I really, really appreciate everyone who does stuff, and people do it at all different levels. And so there's anyone who makes a contribution to helping these boys is a hero to me. So I'm really appreciative of being amongst such a good group of supporters.
Very true. I'm gonna let you go. So see you guys all next time.
Yeah, have a happy Memorial Day tomorrow.
You too.
And hopefully we'll have a chat again soon.
Definitely. I'll be in touch.
All right, mate. You take care.
All right. See y'all later.
Bye.